do try to space out the 80s new wave bands I cover on One Hit Wonderland, but going more than a few episodes without covering at least one of them feels wrong. I've got a long list to get through. A long list. So I feel like I should get to work on that. And today...
You, Flock of Seagull.
Yes! A Flock of Seagulls. Not the Flock of Seagulls, just a Flock of Seagulls. A band largely known for two things. One of them is I Ran, the MTV-powered top 10 smash that was a big major hit at the dawn of the 80s. The other is their lead singer's unmatchably, legendarily ridiculous hairdo, one that has to be considered as the outright stupidest hairstyle of the 80s. And it's not like the 80s was short of competition for that title. I mean, look at it. It's some kind of combination of, it's like part mullet, part emo fringe, part pointy-haired boss from Dilbert. Underneath that horrible styling gel and chainsaw accident was an actual band, not that you would know. Lead singer Mike Score has always lamented how the hairstyle has overshadowed the music, which you should not need Captain Hindsight to point out how this happened, dude. Pretty much everything about this band, its sound, its look, its name, signifies pretty much everything iconic, for good or for bad, about the early 80s. And yet they've never seemed to get their fair due. Who were they? What were they about? Why did they end up running so far away afterwards? Well, let's find out. A Flock of Seagulls was started in 1979 by lead singer and eventually lead synth player Mike Score as a side hobby away from his day job as, hold on, this is amazing, you'll never guess, a hairdresser. Apparently he designed that monstrosity himself. Yeah, it was the 80s, everyone had big hair, I know, whatever, it looks really dumb, I'm not going to bend on this. Now, Flock of Seagulls was from Liverpool, a city which apparently brought forth some middlingly successful bands in the 60s. And that's mostly what it's known for in the music world, but Liverpool also produced a pretty serious post-punk scene in the very late 70s and early 80s. Now, unlike most of the English new wave scene, the Liverpool scene had two major characteristics. One, they mostly favored guitars over synthesizers, and two, they had a cavalcade of just the stupidest band names that have ever existed. A Flock of Seagulls fits firmly into both those categories. First of all, they did in fact mostly favor guitar. I mean, they're a synth band technically, but not by very much. Most of what's going on in I Ran is guitar, because the lead singer Mike Score isn't exactly working very hard on those keys. Yeah, not exactly Chopin level keyboarding there. And yes, they did have a pretty dumb band name, if only because a large group of seagulls is called a colony, not a flock. The name comes from lead singer Mike Score having just read Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and then right afterward hearing a random lyric from a punk song. And yet, oddly enough, Flock of Seagulls are not really considered a major part of the Liverpool scene because, and get this, they were never much of a thing in England. I'm used to these British one-hit wonders being at least mid-level big deals in their home countries, but no. Flock of Seagulls are much better remembered in America, where they were touring fairly extensively in advance of their first album. Their first couple singles weren't hits, but they were pretty big in the dance club scene, so they were already poised to make a breakthrough when their label told them to put on something nice because that afternoon they were going to shoot a music video. I just love how blindsided everyone was by MTV. I mean, personally, I prefer the long version of I Ran, which starts with like 2 full minutes of the band warming up. That's some good build-up. I Ran got as high as number 9 in America, and also did pretty well in Australia off the back of this video, which... You know, even for 1982, this is a cheap, crappy video. Like, you can even see the camera in the mirrors. But MTV turned out to work best with bizarre, eye-catching videos with weird imagery, and despite having basically no budget, this video fit the bill. Oddly enough, for their only big hit, their career-defining video doesn't appear to feature their image-defining hairdo yet. I would call that something more like a blonde Edward Scissorhands, really. Like I said, A Flock of Seagulls were technically a synth band, but their lead instrument was the guitar. And one of the things that makes them unique is that cool guitar sound effect they had. And that's a big reason why I Ran was one of the few new wave songs featured on Guitar Hero. What I don't hear many people talk about is what I Ran is actually about, mostly because in the 80s songs didn't really have to be about anything. What is he running from, and why? He's running from a girl? I figured with hair like that you wanted them running from you. And why couldn't he get away? What's that bit about the Aurora Borealis? It turns out though there is a reason for all of this. The lyrics, the video, the hair, everything. And that reason is aliens. Yes, their entire debut album is basically themed around UFOs, and I Ran is specifically about an alien abduction. I don't know why this wasn't obvious to me before. I mean, the spacey guitar, the otherworldly lyrics, the fearful tone, what the hell else could this be about? The whole reason he wears his hair like that is because he's trying to look like a space alien. It's Ziggy Stardust for the new wave era. It's brilliant. Okay, it's not that brilliant. Because if you're going for an image that out there, you have to really commit to it, and they hadn't quite yet. It's hard to look otherworldly while wearing khakis. Also, we haven't developed a persona beyond hair and spastic faces. But nonetheless, musically, I think I Ran is a pretty awesome song. And so did most of America. I Ran was at the forefront of a bold new era of music. And yet, for the most part, it ended up that Flock of Seagulls ran so far away from success from this point on. What happened? Well, let's take a look at what kind of stupid crap A Flock of Seagulls tried to follow it up with. The follow-up single was called Space Age Love Song. It is one of my favorite songs of all time. I Ran is a good song. Space Age Love Song is one of the best songs of the 80s. I stand by that. I'm not even sure I would call this a failed follow-up, even in popularity terms. It only reached number 30, but I still hear it every now and then on the radio or like on 80s nights, and not as much as I Ran, obviously, but certainly much more than some of the big hits of 1982. I really can't praise this song enough. And Space Age Love Song is the perfect title because that's exactly what it sounds like. I can't imagine a better title for it, and I can't imagine a better song with that title. Why didn't this do better? Because people are stupid and they were too busy listening to, I don't know, Air Supply or something. They also scored one more other top 40 hit. One called Wishing If I Had a Photograph, which has its fans. Not really one of them, I prefer their fast songs better, but this is actually their only big hit in England. Didn't stop them from moving to America a few years later, though. It's not the makeup and it's not the way that you dance. Notice that they are keeping strong with the sci-fi theme. They made quite a few videos like that. Having watched all the Flock of Seagulls videography, I can tell you that every single one of them is absolutely amazing. A band with that haircut pretty much has to live up to making some prime ridiculous 80s videos, and they were up to the challenge. Unfortunately, the critical consensus is that Flock of Seagulls had basically one good album and then maybe 2 songs worth listening to after that. Even their fans will tell you that you probably shouldn't listen to anything they released after 1984. Let's take a look why. Guitarist Paul Reynolds didn't move with them to America. Instead, he left the band, which, in my opinion, is a big reason why they stopped being good, because he had a pretty distinct sound. Mike's score is the only one who stayed with it. A lot of the other original members dropped out pretty quickly after that too, and they never really had a hit again. I can tell you why. See, Flock of Seagulls is a pretty good index of how much trends can change in just 2 years. Now you're probably thinking, what? Synthpop was still around through the rest of the 80s, wasn't it? Well, yes it was, but it changed in a way that was not particularly amenable to a Flock of Seagulls. By that I mean it got a lot prettier. After 1983, especially after the arrival of Duran Duran, New Wave gets a whole lot more attractive and less ridiculous, and that was not good to a band like Flock of Seagulls, who were fundamentally a weird band who trafficked in oblique lyrics and space alien imagery. Their entire appeal was built around this. Keep that in mind, because this is what they sounded like by 1986. I don't care what you think of that. That is some hardcore selling out. That's basically the end of the story for Flock of Seagulls. Just the downward slope of declining fortunes, which we could call the classic arc of the one-hit wonder band. They didn't release another album until 1995, which, no, if they didn't fit in 1986, they didn't stand a chance in the 90s. However, Mike's score does still tour with a rotating cast of musicians. Doesn't have the haircut anymore because he got old and bald, and trying to still have luxurious locks just made him look like Meatloaf, so he just wears a hat now. And while bands resenting their biggest hits is the cliche, Mike Score is maybe the first guy I've covered on this show who actually does seem openly resentful of his one song. If he could get away with it, he says, he'd stop playing it, but of course he can't. Maybe not a whole lot better, but yeah, better. Even with the absolute glut of new wave bands out in the early 80s, I feel like a Flock of Seagulls carved out a sufficiently unique style for themselves. You can tell what makes them stick out from, say, Kaja Goo Goo. Of course, Space Age Love Song also counts pretty highly in their favor. That said, I'm not surprised they burned out so quickly. This was a band designed for 1982 and 83. And pretty much only 82 and 83. They could not survive outside of those fairly unique conditions. And as it turns out, they didn't have a whole lot of ideas beyond their first album. But despite their one-hit reputation, I feel pretty confident in going to bat for them. Flock of Seagulls, worthwhile band. Stupid hair. Really, really stupid hair. Like even for an alien. Aliens would know better than that. Okay, I'm done.
Couldn't get away.